Out of the immediately recognizable animation studios that just about everyone knows about, I think Aardman has kinda cemented itself as my personal favorite. They may be less frequent in output, but that's because they are, in my opinion, the only animation studio who has ever just not released anything that wasn't high quality. The exchange for that is that there's just really not many films to talk about. But I'll take that over rushing mid-content. Aardman, if you don't know, is a primarily stop-motion based animation studio in the UK, mostly known for Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep, definitely their biggest franchises. Their films are very British, very witty, have lots of great visual gags, and are well-crafted and gorgeous beyond belief, and oft have a really strong heart, even in their silliest, zaniest outings. Nothing here matches the heights of, say, Pixar, but nothing even comes close to their lows either. It's a really great selection of 10 films we're going to take a look at today. I've been pretty excited for this one, let me tell ya. Only ground rule, we're looking at the feature-length film, so none of the admittedly beyond excellent Wallace and Gromit shorts. Might do a different video discussing those because literally 3 out of 4 of those are genuine masterpieces, and one of them is one of my favorite animated things of all time. That is for another day, perhaps. For now, this is every Aardman feature, ranked, starting with what I consider to be their only real miss.
Just speak into its ear, Mom. It will mimic everything it hears. I don't even know if I'm holding it that... Testing?
Early Man is so unremarkable. Not bad at all, just surprisingly unmemorable and not all too funny, which is really shocking for Aardman. Now, to be clear, nothing about this movie is annoying or really even bad. It's just so uninspired. I just watched this movie, but I've already forgotten most of what happens. The general plot is we got these cavemen, but then the advanced bronze civilization shows up and takes over. Newt Scamander's the protagonist, and he's pretty good in the role, even if the character is really forgettable.
Was that the bite of 87?
Tom Hiddleston as the villain is definitely the most consistently fun aspect, but even then, he's still just not a very memorable character with a really boring motive. Aardman villains, as we will discuss throughout this list, usually have incredibly unique comedic motives that add to their memorable performances. There are some banger villains throughout these movies. Lord Newth is not one of them. There's no dinosaurs or prehistoric creatures at all in this movie, which was really disappointing because I think they looked great in the Aardman style. Also, just want to add that this is like the only Aardman movie where I think the character designs kinda suck. In general, I don't think any of the non-Bronze City sets look particularly unique or fun. And also, the plot of this movie just completely loses me once we get into the football stuff. Sports movies just typically aren't for me, because it's just one of those genres where you can always predict one of 2 endings. The underdogs win, or the underdogs lose, but realizing winning isn't important to them. This falls into every sports movie cliche in the book, and the fact it's dumb cavemen competing isn't really as funny as the writers probably thought it was. There are like 2 jokes and gags I remember. One, when I raise my arm up like this, it hurts! And the entire message bird sequence, definitely my favorite scene in the movie. It's very funny and very well animated. It's also 1 minute of a 90-minute movie. Too many side characters with one trait, straight up has the most basic form of the strong woman beats the sexism claims made against her I've ever seen. It just says that, and it's really weak. There's no subtlety, like, at all, in this entire movie. Definitely not a bad movie, but I will probably never think about it again. Let's move on to the cool stuff.
She's won the prize! Oh, wow. What a lucky ducky!
Chicken Run 2, Dawn of the Nugget, is worse than the first movie, and also a lot, softer than the first. Like these colors are way brighter, I'm just saying. But it's still pretty fun. It has lots of neat concepts and ideas. The focus being on prior protagonist Ginger's daughter, Chicken Hilda, was a respectable choice, and she's a pretty fun, albeit traditional character. Like, she's literally just Hilda, down to the voice actors being the same. It's very distracting. I still like the Chicken Run cast. The heist story it follows is very entertaining. I just don't know how much this needed to be made. Also, it is one of those movies where the trailer basically entirely gives away the big reveal, so if you have not seen this movie or any marketing, I implore you, go watch the first one, and then watch this one blind. It's obvious what they do, but the reveal scene itself is so well built up and so good. I wish they didn't show it in the trailer. Plus, I do think it's commendable that they trade the first movie's dark themes for just a lot more dark humor, and that kind of works for me. Yeah, I like Dawn of the Nugget for what it is, a somewhat rehashy sequel that doesn't live up, but is exceptionally gorgeous and entertaining. Oh yeah, also the replacement voice actors mostly do a good job, but yeah, they're not as good. Besides the Mel Gibson replacement, I vastly prefer this guy. Oh, and one of the rats had my favorite line in the whole movie. That gear joke made me laugh way harder than it should have. It's a good movie, but another one I'm probably gonna keep forgetting even happened, which is unfortunate. That popcorn scene is really cool though, like how they even do that. Whoa.
Okay, men. To action! We surrender! No!
Flushed Away is kind of a weird one for me, because on the one hand, I really don't think this movie's quite up to Aardman's usual comedic standard. Like, it has its moments that hit and are very funny, but it also has the most misses out of pretty much any Aardman movie. And it feels a bit more immature than usual. Plus, this is extra sharking for an Aardman movie, but I really hate the way this thing looks. It uses the same general techniques and art style as the stop motion stuff, but because it's CG rendered and these designs are so smooth and move so smooth, it's just kind of off-putting. Like, it's not just the super flat textures and lighting, but it's how fluidly they move too. I don't think it looks right most of the time. It looks cheap, which is the last thing I want to say about an Aardman movie. Now, in spite of those two issues, this movie also has one of the most creative plots and some of the best characters the studio has ever created. I hate Sid, he's annoying, but literally every other character is so good. Roddy and Rita are good, they have excellent chemistry. I find their predictable relationship issues actually charming, which is nice. But oh my gosh, okay, the villains. The Toad is what I was alluding to back with Lord Newth. This is an Aardman villain. A great, wacky motive and a super fun evil plan with a fantastic comedic performance.
Huzzah! A man of quality!
And his design is great. My criticisms of the visual do not apply to this guy. The off-putting nature actually serves this character and makes him even better. Plus, I love all his henchmen, from the two rats who definitely get the most laughs out of me, to the French frog who had my favorite joke in the whole movie.
We surrender! No!
These characters all really work for me, and they make such a fantastic antagonist squad. I generally really like the story this movie tells. It's pretty ambitious and probably would have been super hard to pull off in stop motion, and super expensive. I commend the imagination it took for this world and this story, and ultimately I do really like it. Also, I learned 5 minutes ago while watching an Aardman documentary that after Were Rabbit, there was like a fire in their warehouse and all their materials and sets burned down, which is probably why this movie looks like that. I mean, that's a bummer, but it still looks weird. It's beyond weird seeing Alex the Lion in an Aardman film. Shaun the Sheep 2, Farmageddon, isn't as good as Shaun the Sheep 1 movie. It is fun. It has plenty of good dialogueless gags throughout that definitely make it worth checking out. I really love this montage in the middle with the sheep building a theme park. It's very funny. Plot goes in some pretty loony directions, and while it loses some of the nice heart the first movie had, it definitely makes up for the scope this time around, with all this alien misunderstanding madness. And there still is a pretty strong emotional core, with the villain's motive being surprisingly sweet. She gets a very heartwarming ending. I wasn't really expecting that, but it's really nice. I really like that both these Shaun the Sheep movies tie some sort of thematic element to the fact there's no dialogue. Like here, Shaun and the alien, oh yeah, there's an alien, look at him, whoa, there he is, have to learn to communicate through mostly gestures and simple sounds, and I think that's really neat. It adds extra meaning to the fact there's not a single word uttered. Ultimately, I do like the emotionality and the focus of the first one more. I think this one does meander a lot more, and its climax is a bit over the top, even for me. Oh yeah, I guess I should quickly go over the story. Alien, there's an alien. Government and villain think Bitzer, the dog, is alien, so they study him. It's funny, and Alien and Sean bond. He wants to go home. It's an E.T. homage, but it's a very well-animated, charming, and funny E.T. homage that I like a lot more now than I did when I first saw it. I wish I had more to say, but it's definitely a vibe movie, and I recommend you go vibe with it.
Apart from you, they're the most stupid creatures on this planet. They don't plot, they don't scheme, and they are not organized.
Chicken Run is Aardman's first feature, and arguably their most iconic. It's between this one and another we'll get to, but I see a lot of Chicken Run buzz around even today, and frankly, it's very easy to see why. This is an excellent little movie with a simple but great premise. Chickens want to escape from their farm, but it's a prison escape movie. The jokes all land incredibly well, and it has some very exciting sequences, as well as a great climax. Plus, these characters are all really delightful, despite most of them having fairly limited screen time. Ginger is such a great protagonist. I love the quiet, very somber moments with her. The movie gets pretty dark, and it doesn't shy away from letting Ginger react to her friends dying in a realistic way. This is the chicken jailbreak movie, and I love it for fully committing to the bit, including with the sentimentality. Then, of course, there's Mrs. Tweedy, who is probably the single most popular Aardman villain of all time, and it's for good reason. The way she goes from clever and quietly sinister to deranged axe-wielding lunatic is so great. The performance is so good with her screaming. It's top-notch. She's an absolute blast of character and a really stellar villain. The rats are super fun too, love those rats. So the only thing holding this movie back from like masterpiece status, it's Rocky. I just really don't like him. He's fine, he's fine. He has plenty of funny and sweet moments, and of course redeems himself in a nice way, and I like his flying lesson sequences. Those scenes are funny. I just think the liar reveal story they go with him is kind of tired. It's not terrible, but it's definitely contrived. I feel like Ginger's smarter than this. Still, Chicken Run is a banger, and I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, it's a classic for a good reason. Shaun the Sheep movie has no right to be this good. There is one burp joke, which genuinely takes this movie down a couple points, but otherwise, this is so shockingly smart and maybe the most emotional Aardman movie out of all of them? There's definitely one later that gives it competition for that status, but I don't know, man. This movie is insanely sweet at points, and I love it for that. They didn't really need to do that. Before we really get into it, though, I do want to say that this movie is just generally really good and entertaining, with some great visual gags and slapstick. They build to an insanely satisfying climax. The villain is really funny too. This insanely committed animal control officer who very clearly wanted to be a CIA agent. He's hilarious. Plus, this is the single wildest main plot they could have gone with. The farmer who owns the sheep gets amnesia and becomes a famous hairstylist, so the sheep need to go save him. Him getting amnesia and not remembering the animals, to me, is another good thematic tie to a lack of dialogue. And it all ties into not just the best scene in the movie, but maybe my favorite scene in all of Aardman. Yeah, so it's the scene where all the sheep sing a song to cheer Timmy up. It is just unnervingly sweet. I don't understand why this makes me feel so hard, but it just does. But then it ties into the farmer plotline in a really great way. He hears the song and recognizes it, and we get just this amazing shot with him staring vacantly out the window, lip-syncing along to the song. Perfect scene. I really don't have any issues with this movie besides the burp joke. It's just not higher because I am a dialogue enjoyer, and the top four just have really great, charming dialogue. Obviously not a knock against this movie. I still think it's about as good as a silent film could possibly be. And again, it makes me feel things and stuff, but man, dialogue is my favorite part of storytelling, so ultimately a choice had to be made. Still though, Shaun the Sheep movie is kind of absurdly great, and I highly recommend giving it a watch if you like being overloaded with charm.
A chicken? Behind all this? Good grief! It's you! Again!
Wallace and Gromit Vengeance Most Foul was the inspiration for this video even existing. This is the most recent Aardman film and the long-awaited feature return of Wallace and Gromit, who are maybe some of my favorite characters in anything ever. I've wanted these two to star in another movie for so long, and while it didn't quite reach those expectations, I think it makes up for it by being, in my opinion, a perfect thematic ending to the Wallace and Gromit saga. This one really examines Wallace as a character and points out pretty much all his flaws and makes him look borderline unlikable at times. He invents Norbot, who I think is just a brilliant reflection for Wallace himself, as well as not so subtle commentary on AI usage in society in general. But it's all just to set up that beautiful ending where he reaffirms that he can live without inventing, but he can't live without Gromit. These two's friendship goes beyond your average kind of bond. And even in a movie focused on deconstructing it, it still proves that these two are just so important to one another. I love that. Gromit probably gets the most focus, which is fair. Gromit is so good, and yeah, probably one of my top 10 favorite characters ever. But do you know who's a top 5 favorite character ever? Feathers McGraw. The villain of a previous Wallace and Gromit short, this insane master thief Penguin gets every single feeling across perfectly, and his face doesn't even emote. This guy. Absolute favorite Aardman villain, and it's not even really close. Nothing here quite matches the time he pulled a gun on Gromit, but his evil plan to complete his original heist while also getting revenge on the iconic duo is surprisingly well thought out. Also, the cop from Were Rabbit is cool. He's here. Very funny. I like him. Also really like the rookie cop character. She was very charming. The nun gag was fantastic. The entire climax was incredible. This is the one aspect I might actually prefer to that other movie. Especially the whole bit on the bridge, thanks to the emotions and just how well it's all framed, and oh my gosh, it's so good! Ultimately, I do think this film is just ever so slightly held back by the reputation and genuine unabashed excellence of what it's trying to live up to. Like, it does feel a smidge tame and small scale in comparison to that other movie, and it's definitely less funny, but it still really works. I want a million more Wallace and Gromit movies, but if they ended here, I'd be 100% satisfied. Again, Feathers McGraw is one of the best characters of all time. That shot of him petting the seal, come on, it's so good. Hey guys, I'm coming in from the future to say, oh man, it got nominated for Best Animated Feature. I have literally never wanted something to win at the Oscars more that's actually nominated. I'm so excited. It's not going to. I really want it to though.
Sorry.
Arthur Christmas is the only Aardman movie I'd never seen before, and wow, was I missing out. We'll address the elephant in the room and my biggest issue with the movie, the animation. It's not bad animation, but I just don't really vibe with the character designs. The eyes are just way too far apart and tiny on a lot of the characters, especially the elves and Arthur himself. It's a vast departure from the usual Aardman style in the art department, but I did find it kind of interesting that this thing is still framed like your average Aardman movie. Anyway, as for the movie itself, this is probably one of my favorite Christmas movies now. I love the concept of Santa Claus being a mantle passed down generation by generation, and I especially love the unique family conflicts that arise from here. The antagonist is voiced by Newton Little Big Planet, and that's neat. My favorite character was definitely the current Santa. I thought it was a very interesting take on the cultural figure. He had a neat dilemma, and he was definitely the funniest part of the movie. It's cool that there's really not a villain, and the previously mentioned antagonist comes to the right conclusion at the right time. Good stuff. In general, I love Arthur himself and his commitment to Christmas philosophy against all odds. It's a very infectiously jolly movie. It lets the quiet moments play out. There's a lot of funny moments. Grandpa mentions the Cuban Missile Crisis like multiple times, and I will not elaborate on that. It's a very endearing, great movie if you haven't already seen it. I do think some of the gag and distracting hijink sequences were a bit much, but it's not a huge issue, especially when considering how many things it gets so right. A great time. I loved it.
The best bit
About being a pirate.
is Ham Night!
Alright, so these top two could honestly be swapped around depending on my mood, so ultimately this is purely going on from a critical perspective and not my personal enjoyment perspective. So in second, we have The Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists, which is a way better title than whatever we got in the US. Probably the single funniest Aardman movie of all of them. I love every joke in this thing. It's a lot saucier than most, and has a perfect comedic energy throughout its entire runtime. This does prevent it from being exceptionally sweet or heartfelt, but who cares, it's Ham Night! The plot is such a good premise, with the pirate's parrot actually being a dodo bird, so they team up with Charles Darwin, who maybe has the single funniest character introduction scene of all time.
I'll never get a girlfriend.
I am so unhappy.
Queen Victoria is the villain. I won't dare spoil her motive, but let me tell you, she is prime Aardman villain. It's great. The whole movie's a comedic riot. It builds up to a perfect climax. Both action scenes are really great. I love that none of the pirates have actual names. I love that one of the pirates is just a woman in disguise, and this is never addressed in the film. It's just a great runner. The Pirate King might be the best character in fiction, maybe, only rivaled by Feathers McGraw. I love this big CGI whale that doesn't look bad. I know I didn't even explain anything about it or why it's good, I just listed a bunch of things. There's a monkey in this movie that has a bunch of time cards that he flips around. There's about the pirate captain inspiring the evolution theory. There's a montage. There's a song where they say, "I'm not crying, it's just been raining on my face." Do I need to explain why this is one of my favorite comedies of all time? Because it is. Perfect 10 out of 10. It's probably objectively like an 8, but it's a 10 out of 10 in my heart. Let's move on to the best Aardman movie.
Lovely food. For rabbits, that is.
Yeah, it really wasn't going to be top. Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit is everything Aardman is great at, and more. Wallace and Gromit are in prime characterization, and absolutely no notes on anything they do. It's perfect. Everything they do is perfect in this movie. The plot is incredibly creative, a hilarious homage to classic monster movies, while genuinely creating a suspenseful monster hunting mystery in its own right. It fully commits to being a monster movie, while also just happening to be hilarious and focusing on the dumbest monster ever. It's so much cooler than just pointing out tropes and saying, "Whoa, tropes, right?" Like, they actually made a proper narrative, even if it is parody-ish. Plot progression-wise, this movie's great, because it really is progressed by the character's direct actions. While specifically, I love his romance with Lady Tottenham. She's a very fun character with a great design, and his rivalry with the villain. This guy is great. He's just basically a more comedic take on a Gaston-like character. I love how petty he is. I love his evil smirk when he decides he's gonna kill Wallace. The climax is great. I see the scene where Gromit and the villain's dog are digging around for coins reposted all the time, which is fair. It's very funny. I like it a lot. Ultimately, this is about on par with Pirates comedy-wise, maybe a bit less. I mean, that segment was literally just me listing everything I find hilarious. But like, what makes it the winner is that it has a great script outside of the comedy, and the best directing out of any Aardman movie. Like, that shot where Gromit is terrified and it transitions to the bells ringing is so good. Also, Hutch is a very good thing, look at him. Yeah, I'm thinking it's pretty easily the crown jewel of Aardman, and probably my favorite stop-motion movie of all time. Though, honestly, Pirates might actually be my favorite. There's this part where the albino pirate's head is floating as the pirate captain is hallucinating, and he says, "Wee, I'm a floating head." So honestly, it's pretty much neck and neck. I don't know which one I like more. But rest assured, critically, Were-Rabbit is the winner. So that was the ranking. In conclusion, Aardman is absolutely brilliant, and this was an absolute blast to write and talk about. Want to see me rank more animation studios? I'm not doing Sony, but the others I wouldn't mind doing. I'm going to be trying a lot of new things this year, so be on the lookout for all sorts of stuff alongside your regularly scheduled analytical content. Support me on Patreon if you want to make a boys cartoon making dreams come true. See you later, I'm Flyoto!